the non-private limited earns 45 lakhs annually from the sales of the pharmaceuticals proceed products and 8 lakhs as interest income on the loan from the loan and the deposit the income the company believes it falls below 40 lakhs threshold for the mandatory registration as its primary business is supply of the goods. Explain whether the company is in the view is right. Would your answer differ if the interest income is 3 lakhs? The interest income. Hello guys, welcome to the session. How are you all? Hope you guys are doing well. And this is time to study. So now let's continue with the studies. As its primary business interest income is an exempt services and hence it is includable in the aggregate turnover of non-private limited deciding the threshold limit applicable for registration of the non-private limited is still deemed to be engaged only in the supply of the goods for the applicability of the 40 lakh threshold. Need not to take registration. No need to take registration. Need to take registration. Am I audible? Now registration required only for the place of the business from where taxable supply takes place. Now the basic rules of the GST registration. The statewide registration. GST registration is required in each state where the business has a place of business making the taxable supplies. The taxable supplies across the state. Taxable supplies across states. The registration in one state mandates the registration in all other states where the taxable goods or the services are supplied. Exempt supplies, no GST registration is needed in the states where only exempt and non-taxable supplies meet section 22 and 23 fixed establishment principle. The service providers registration is required in the state with the fixed establishment. Now temporary work, no registration is needed for the temporary operations in other states. Now the liaison or the marketing offices, no registration is required in the state where only the liaison or the marketing office operates without making the supplies. Hello guys, welcome to the session. 18 people are watching live. Do like, share and subscribe guys. Hello guys, hello all. Welcome to the session. How are you all? Hope you guys are doing well. Am I audible guys? Hello guys, do like the stream and subscribe the channel. Phase establishment as per the states. The service provider registration is required in the state with a fixed establishment. Temporary workload registration is needed for the temporary operations in the states. Now liaison with special category states. Registration is standard for the business special category states with the supply of the multiple states including the special category. Special category states the 10 lakh threshold applies, but if the supplies from the special category are exempt, the lower threshold doesn't apply. The lower threshold doesn't apply. Now registration in case of an agent, the own capacity on behalf of the principal, own capacity versus on behalf of the principal. If an agent supplies on their own capacity, then he must take a compulsory registration. If an agent supplies the goods on behalf of the principal, then the aggregate turnover of the agents includes the following: the supplies made on their own account behalf of their principal, the supplies made on the behalf of the principal, then the person liable for the registration in case of the transfer of the business, the going concern, the transferring successor must register from the date of the transfer of the succession amalgamation demerger. The registration is required from the date of the incorporation confirmed by the registrar of the company. Section 23. The person not liable for the registration even though aggregate turnover exceeds the threshold, the exempt or the non-taxable labor and hired labored or unsupervised. Now if the agriculturist make any supply make any supply other than the produce from the land cultivation, the registration threshold applies. Now the clarification regarding the GST rates and the classification of the goods, circular number 247 425. Now agriculture is supplying the direct pepper, direct dried pepper, and extent of the supply of the produced output of the cultivation of the land is not liable to get registered under section 23, and it is exempt from the GST. The agriculturist supplying the resins is not liable to get registered under section 23 even if it is exempt, as it is an exempt supply. Then notified person, section 23, to the person making only the services charge supplies notification number and 5. Now the person engaged only in making the supplies of the taxable goods and other services, total tax on which is liable to be paid on the reverse charge basis by the recipient under section 93 are exempt from obtaining the registration. The proviso inserted by 24th 2024. However, such exemptions is not applicable to a person engaged in the supply of the metal scrap or the registered person. To a registered person, the government may exempt the specific categories on the recommendation of the GST Council. No registration of the suppliers where the tax is paid under the reverse charge section 93. Now the entity services GTA services exclusively supply recipient of the GTA services. Now aggregate turnover not applicable below threshold limit. The GST registration exempt under section 23, mandatory section 24. Now the reason the services under the reverse charge, no self GST payment liable for the reverse charge tax on the GTA services. Section 24, compulsory registration. In certain cases, the compulsory registration notwithstanding anything contained in the section 22, the following categories of the person shall be required to be registered under this act, irrespective of the aggregate turnover. Interstate supplies of the goods. Interstate supplies of the goods. The person making any interstate supplies, any interstate taxable supplies. The exception in the following cases: the threshold is available even though there is interstate supply. The supply of the services notification number 10 2017. Now the supplier of the services making any interstate supplies of the taxable services aggregate turnover not exceeding 20 lakhs for the supply for the special category of 4 states and 10 lakhs in the financial year. The registration is needed for after the threshold. Now handicraft goods notification number 8 2017. Now the supplier of the goods making the interstate taxable supplies of the handicraft goods aggregate turnover not exceeding rupees 10-20 lakhs for the special category states of 4 state to 10 lakh in the financial year. The registration need after the threshold. Now the condition: the person required to obtain PAN, they generate e-way bill with the provision of the Rule 138. With the provision of the Rule 138. As well, taxable person making the taxables. The exception in the following cases: the threshold is available even though there is an interstate supply. The handicraft goods, the supplier of the goods CTB as well taxable person making an interstate taxable supplies of the handicraft goods and the aggregate turnover not exceeding 10 lakh 20 lakh for the special category states 10 lakh in the financial year. Registration is needed after the threshold condition. The person is obtain and even the person who are required to pay tax under the reverse charge. 11 11. An agriculturist who is only engaged in the supply of the produce out of the cultivation of the land and its aggregate turnover exceeds the applicable threshold limit during the financial year. The the Dharun provides provides services as a business facilitator to a Zero Bank Limited by facilitating in opening of the bank account to villages and its rural branches in the Punjab, and earned a commission of 22 lakhs in the month of the April 2020. So far, he is he is not registered under GST, the Tharun tax consultant advised him that he is liable to registration under the GST as his gross receipt exceeds 20 lakh. The Tharun has no other receipt business activity other than the above. Now legal provision, the following are liable to obtain the registration. The person engaged exclusively in the supply of goods and services not subject to tax or wholly exempt from the tax are not liable for the registration. The agriculturists are not liable for the GST registration when they supplying the produce from the land. Cultivation, discussion and conclusion. In the given case, the agriculturist is exclusively engaged in making the exempt supply of the produce out of the cultivation of the land. See what to whom are you talking? तुम किसको बोल रहे हो सब्सक्राइब करने के लिए? Only you watching the session. This is not regard to apply the registration under GST. The services provided by a business facilitator to a banking company with respect to account it is a rural area branch are exempt from the GST. In the given case, Dharun is engaged in exclusively in providing the exempt services. It is not liable to obtain the registration even though its aggregate turnover exceeds rupees 20 lakh. Thus, the advice given by the tax consultant is not correct. Section 24, the compulsory registration in the certain cases, compulsory registration in certain cases and the certain cases. State with the brief reason whether the following suppliers of the taxable goods are required to be registered under the GST law. Mr. Raghav is engaged in the wholesale come retail trading of the medicines in the state of the Assam. His aggregate turnover during the financial year is 9 lakh, which consists of 8 lakh of the interstate supplies and 1 lakh of the interstate supplies. Mr. S.N. Gupta of the Rajasthan is engaged in trading of the taxable goods and is on his own account and also acting as an agent of Mr. Rishi of Delhi. His turnover in the financial year is rupees 12 lakhs on his own account and 9 lakh on the behalf of the principal. Both the turnovers are intrastate. Legal provision: a person making the interstate taxable supply of the goods other than the taxable supply of the handicraft goods are compulsorily required to obtain the registration irrespective of the quantum of the aggregate turnover. Now discussion and conclusion. Here Raghav is making the interstate taxable supply of the goods, thus he is required to obtain the registration compulsorily under the GST laws even though his aggregate turnover does not exceed the threshold limits applicable under section 22. Now legal provision. The provisions: the persons making the taxable supplies of the goods on behalf of the other taxable person, whether as an agent or otherwise, are required to obtain the registration compulsorily under GST laws irrespective of the quantum of the aggregate turnover. Section 24. The aggregate turnover includes all the supplies made by the taxable person, whether on his own account or made on behalf of the principal. Explanation to the section 22. If the agent issues the invoice in his own name, then the section 24 gets attracted. Otherwise, he is liable to register under section 22 if his aggregate turnover crosses the threshold limit for the registration. Of discussion and the conclusion. In the given case, since Mr. S.N. Gupta is also acting as an agent of Mr. Rishi of the Delhi, is required to obtain the registration compulsorily under the GST laws irrespective of the quantum of the aggregate turnover. Assumption: it is assumed that the agent is issuing the invoice of the further supply in his own name. Mr. Q, a casual taxable person of Gujarat state, is the trader of the taxable notified handicraft goods and makes the supplies of the state of Maharashtra, Rajasthan and Andhra Pradesh. The turnover for October is rupees 18 lakh. Explain the provisions of the registration for the casual taxable person under the GST. Examine whether Mr. Q is liable for the registration or not. What will be your answer if Mr. Q makes the trading? Mixed trading is the taxable notified products instead of taxable notified handicraft goods, which involves 75% making of the machine and 25% by hands. Hello Parki. Hello. How are you? A casual taxable person is required to obtain a compulsory registration. Guys, do subscribe the channel. A casual taxable person is required to obtain compulsory registration under GST irrespective of the quantum of the aggregate turnover. Aggregate turnover section 24. However, in the following cases, the threshold available even though there is an interstate supplies the supplier of the goods CTP, making the interstate taxable suppliers of the handicraft goods and the aggregate turnover not exceeding 10-20 lakh for a special category of the state 10 lakhs in the financial year. The registration is needed. The registration is needed after the threshold condition. The person required to obtain PAN generate e-way bill with the it has been assumed. It has been assumed. I am fine, Parthi. How are you? How are you doing? And what about your school and exams? It has been assumed that Mr. Q started the supply of the goods in the October itself. Now, in case Mr. Q is engaged in the trading of the notified goods, which are predominantly made by the machine, he will not be eligible for the exemption from the registration under the aforesaid provisions and needs to take the compulsory mandatory registration. Taxable supply of the goods or the services or whether the taxable person, whether as an agent or otherwise as an electronic commerce operator who is required to collect tax at source under the section 52. The person who supplies the person who supply the good or the services or both other than the supply specified under section 9(5) through such eco who is required to collect tax at the sources under section 52. Exceptions in the following cases: the threshold is available even though the supply is made through ECU under section 52. The supply of the services notification number, the supplier of the services other than the specified services under section 9(5) through ECU deducting the TCS under section 52. The vehicle turnover not exceeding 20 lakh for the special category states and 10 lakh in the financial year. Registration is needed after the threshold. Now the supply of the goods. The person making the supply of the goods through the ECU who is required to collect the tax at source under section 52 and aggregate turnover not exceeding 20-40 lakhs for the specified category is 10 lakh subject to the following conditions: shall not make any interstate supply of the goods, shall not make the supply of the goods through the issue is more than one state or UT, shall be required to have PAN, shall declare before making any supply of the goods through the ECU on the common portal their PAN, their address on their place of business and their place of business, the address of the place of the business, the state or the union territory in which such person seeks to make such supply, which shall be subjected to validation on the common portal. Now the granted an enrollment number on the common portal on the successful validation of the PAN shall not be granted more than one enrollment number in the state or union territory. No supply of the goods through ECU unless such persons have been granted an enrollment number where such persons are subsequently granted registration under section 25 of the said act, and the enrollment number shall cease to be valid from the effective date of the registration, especially applicable for the final level. Now input services distributors, whether or not separately registered under this act, every person supplying online information and the database access retrieval services from the place outside India to a person in India other than the registered person. Now every person supplying the online money gaming from the place outside India to a person in India, such other persons are the class of the persons as may be notified by the government on the recommendation of the council. Yes, ये open. Guys, let me bring a glass of water for you. Shall we come? What do you mean by no? For what you said no? Shall we या Kimi? What is mean by no? No क्यों बोल रही हो तुम? मतलब कुछ हुआ था यहाँ पे? मैंने तो कुछ बोला नहीं है अभी. Shall we come? Are you there? Shall we come? Are you there? The state of the person who are not state the person who are not liable for the registration as per the provision of the section 23 and 24 of the central rules of the service tax. The as per section 23 and 22 CGST 2017, the person who are not liable for the registration are as under the person engaged in exclusively in supplying the goods and the services are wholly exempt, not liable to tax than the agriculturist produced out of the cultivation of the land. The persons only engaged in making the supplies of the taxable goods and other services that are liable to tax under the reverse charge except the person engaged in the supply of the metal scrap. The person making the interstate supplies of the taxable services up to an aggregate turnover of 20 lakhs, 20 lakhs, 10 lakh, 10 lakh, 10 lakh in case of the special category of the Manipur, Mizoram, Tripura and Nagaland. The casual taxable person making the taxable supplies of the specified handicraft goods I am good, Rabri Naveen. How are you? Guys, do subscribe the channel and stay connected. The casual taxable person making the taxable supplies as specified handicraft goods up to an aggregate turnover of 20 lakhs 10 lakh in case of the special category states of Manipur, Mizoram, Tripura, Nagaland, subject to the specified conditions. The person making the interstate's taxable supplies of the specified handicraft job workers making the interstate supply of the services to a registered person up to an aggregate turnover of 10 lakhs, 20 lakhs, 10 lakh in case of the special category states of the Manipur, Mizoram, Tripura and Nagaland, subject to the specified condition. The persons making the supply of the services, supplies of the services through an electronic commerce operator other than the supply specified under section 95 of the CGST up to an aggregate turnover of 20 lakhs, 10 lakhs in case of the special category states of Manipur, Mizoram, Tripura and Nagaland. BVD Private Limited in Gujarat exclusively register, manufactures and sells the products that which is exempt from the GST while notification issued under the relevant GST legislations. The company sells that only within the Gujarat and is not registered under the GST law. The turnover of the company in the previous year is 50 lakhs. The turnover is 50 lakh. The company expects the sales of the growth of 10% in the current year. However, the effective the exemption available on that which was withdrawn by the central government and the GST of 5% was imposed on the turnover of the company for the 9 months ended on 31st December was 42 lakhs. Is of the opinion it is not required to get the registered under the GST current financial year. Examine the above scenario and advise BVD Private Limited whether okay a supplier exclusively engaged in the intrastate supply of the goods, the threshold limit of the turnover to obtain the registration. However, a person exclusively engaged in the business of the supplying goods and other services that are not liable to tax are wholly exempt from the tax is not liable to the registration is not liable to registration section 23. Now, as per the aggregate turnover includes the exempt supply as also along with the taxable supplies section 2 plus discussion and conclusion in the given case since BVD Private Limited was engaged in exclusively the supply the exempted goods till the 31st December 2020. It was not required to register till the date the voluntary registration was allowed. This position will change from month as the supply of the goods become taxable from the date and the turnover of the BVD Private Limited is more than 40 lakh since the aggregate turnover limit of 40 lakh includes the exempt turnover turnover. Also the turnover of the Z will, will be considered for determining the threshold limit even though the same was exempt from the GST. Therefore BVD Private Limited needs to register within 30 days from okay guys, now we should end this session as it is already 1.5 hours and now I have to do accounts का class करना है and that is only possible with the mobile phone, so I have to end this session. चलो तब तक के लिए बाय बाय, टेक केयर.